thank you for joining today's webinar, The Power of Different, Leveraging Neurodiversity at Work. Here at CareerCircle, we are a diversity workforce solution company on a mission to change lives by connecting underserved communities with career opportunities and helping organizations build skilled, diverse pipelines. We have a wonderful group of panelists here today, you all. We're going to be providing some insightful and actionable advice on how to create and maintain inclusivity inside and outside of the work environment. With that being said, I know that you're wondering, who is this person? I'm so glad that you asked. My name is Brittany, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I am the Learning and Development Specialist. Wow, I wanted to say account manager. I am the Learning and Development Specialist here at CareerCircle. I have braided natural hair. I have on wide-brimmed clear glasses, as well as a smile. We're currently recording this webinar to ensure accessibility for all of our participants. You may enable closed captioning by clicking on more on the bottom right side of the screen, then click captions and show captions. I want to thank all of our panelists for joining today and for the work that they do within our community to work towards an inclusive environment. I also want to thank you, our attendees, for tuning in, whether it is to cheer us on and support the panelists or to learn and supply yourselves with new tools and best practices to further your inclusivity efforts. If time allows, we'll be able to provide space for questions and answers, but feel free to put questions in the chat throughout. We absolutely want to be able to hear from you as much as we have some questions that we're dying to be able to get our panelists to share about. We want to hear from you, okay? We want this to be something that is impactful for you as well. Okay, to start off our webinar and before introducing our amazing panelists, I wanted to provide some impactful statistics. According to studies from EARN, the Employer Assistance and Resource Network, 15 to 20% of the United States is neurodivergent. So looking at this call, we have 77%, let's round that up to 80%, right? Or 80 individuals. Based on this statistics, 15 to 20%, we have approximately 20 or so individuals on this call that align within the neurodivergent space. And so impactful and so wonderful that we have this group of panelists here that are going to be able to not only speak to this, but also to be able to provide insight. And for those of you that are on the call that identify as part of this population, we're so happy that you're here to be able to share and support and be a part. It's something that we as individuals within the work environment, oftentimes we're not cognizant of the statistics and what that looks like. And so it's so wonderful that we're having the opportunity to talk about it today. With a statistic of nearly 1 in 5, you likely know work alongside or identify neurodivergent individuals, which is what we just talked about. Because no two neurodivergent individuals are exactly alike, everyone will bring unique skill sets and talents to the workspace, as well as have different access and support needs. Identifying how we can embrace everyone and support each individual's needs can enhance the workplace in a multitude of ways. More and more employers are recognizing these benefits, and we hope that our conversation today will be just another building block into a larger actionable motion. Without further ado, I know I've been talking about the panelists already. I am going to start off this conversation, this panel. I want for my former boss and now current colleague and friend, Chelsea Hartner, please introduce yourself to our amazing group of individuals on this call today.
Thank you, Brittany. And thank you everybody thank you CareerCircle for inviting me to be a part of this panel today. My name is Chelsea Hartner, pronouns she, her. For my visual descriptors, I am a Caucasian woman with green eyes. I have almost shoulder length brown hair with some blonde highlights. Today I'm wearing a black blouse with gold earrings. I am the founder of Collectively Neurodiverse, where we help organizations create inclusive, high-performing teams by embracing difference to unleash every mind's potential through neurodiversity. I hold a certification in 360 Inclusive Leadership Compass and have nearly a decade of experience supporting both Metro Detroit and the North American regions in various people functions, from leadership roles within talent recruitment and acquisition to team development and DE&I within strategic human resources. My passion for this work really comes from my personal journey. After being late diagnosed with ADHD, I became deeply committed to advocating for greater understanding and support for neurodiverse individuals in the workplace.
Thank you so much, Chelsea. Thank you. Thank you. And I'm going to go counter clockwise, and I'm going to go with Courtney. Courtney, you're next on my screen. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Brittany, and thank you to CareerCircle for having me here today. To give you a little bit of a description, I am a Caucasian woman. I go by the pronoun she, her. I have long brown, very dark brown curly hair. I'm wearing some tortoiseshell round glasses, a dark green sweater because it's pretty cold up here in Connecticut. And I am from the Organization for Autism Research. I am the manager of the Higher Autism Program, which is a program that is focused on supporting autistic job seekers in finding meaningful employment opportunities and helping organizations and employers to become more inclusive and best support those autistic individuals in the workplace. And I'll pass it back over to Brittany.
Thank you so much for sharing. And I love your glasses. Love them. Allie, love to hear from you.
Hi, my name is Allie Porter. I go by she, her, and I am a talent acquisition relationship manager at Elitist Global Solutions. And I'm also currently running their project to reevaluate our hiring processes and make sure they're as inclusive as possible. And I attended Disability In this summer, which really brought me to that project. It's something I'm very passionate about. I've always been passionate about DE&I. And as somebody who's neurodiverse myself, this scope is really important to me in our hiring practices. I have brown hair and brown eyes, and I am wearing a ladybug patterned sweater, currently sitting out of Denver, Colorado.
Absolutely. Thank you so, so much for sharing. And last, but certainly not least, none other than the Mr. Michael. Can you please give us your descriptive introduction and tell us a little about yourself?
Thank you very much, Brittany. My name is Michael Asikuyabor. I use the pronouns he, him. I'm a Black man with black hair and brown eyes. I'm wearing a white shirt with blue, red, gold African print. I guess people are not able to see that part. It's below. My profession, I'm a vocational therapist, specializing in neurodivergent conditions. I work for Evolve Vocational Services. My background is in rehabilitation counseling, mental health and addictions counseling, and disability management consulting. I've worked extensively in the neurodiversity space. I myself, I'm neurodivergent with ADHD and dyslexia. So that's a little bit about myself. Over to you, Brittany.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much, those that are on the panel that shared how you align with this particular community. Thank you for making it a safe space for our attendees on the call to do so as well. And I see so much love coming from so many different places. I see Philly, I see Atlanta, I see Texas, I see Brooklyn. They didn't just go with New York. They had to say Brooklyn specifically. All right, Michigan. We are so happy that all of these individuals in these regions are represented on today. So with that being said, make sure you all at 1:40 Eastern Standard Time, we're going to start the Q&A, okay? And so with that being said, we want to have some amazing questions to be able to provide to our awesome panelists. So please, throughout, we want to hear from you. Please go ahead and put it into the chat. Now, I'm going to get started with the first burning question, all right? This is for you, Chelsea and Michael. How would you describe neurodiversity, and why is it crucial for today's employers to understand?
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and kick that off. It's really important to definitely start by defining that term, because we definitely don't want to assume that everybody tuning in knows it, even though that is our topic today. So neurodiversity is really a term that's used to represent the natural variations in all of the ways that our diverse brains process and interpret information. but the term is sometimes used to reference neurodivergence, which is really what we're talking about today. That is more of an umbrella term for distinct brain developmental differences, such as ADHD, dyslexia, autism, and others. And with 1 in 5 of every employee in every workplace being neurodivergent, meaning we all work and lead people who are work with and lead people who are neurodivergent, whether we know it or not, it's really critical for employers to understand this. Because at the end of the day, the concept of neurodiversity, it really helps us to remember that everybody thinks and processes differently. So everybody needs intentional leadership and supportive working environments to do their best work. And when difference, like neurodivergence, is empowered in the workplace, our brain variations and different brain functions have shown to actually lead to unique strengths that drive innovation and productivity by over 30% at some employers, which is really critical at a time when companies can't really afford to fall behind their competition.
Yes, thank you very much, Chelsea, for having that amazing definition of what neurodivergence and neurodiversity is. I would add to that, saying that why it's so important for companies to embrace neurodiversity at work. Let's look at the current era, the changes that are happening now rapidly with the introduction of AI. In the past and currently, a lot of companies hire people using various approaches where they look out for people who are able to do very complex administrative work, or are able to retain a lot of information and be able to regurgitate it. These are all things that are, with the introduction of AI, becoming obsolete, right? We are going into an era where innovation basically is the new standard. And who are the most innovators? These are neurodivergent individuals, because they are constantly thinking out of the box. They are constantly finding ways of navigating issues and problems, because a lot of times some of the challenges that they experience are now what AI is able to basically do easily. So now a lot of companies that are forward thinking are looking to basically people who are actually able to work in collaboration with AI and able to innovate and set them up. There are so many other reasons why it is important for companies to embrace this. Let's take, for instance, making sure that you are future-proofing your company's assets. Because a lot of times now, if you are just to hire someone just because they are able to do administrative work, for instance, they are able to take meeting notes. They are able to really organize information in a way that it becomes easy to consume. These are things that AI is able to do. But what AI is not able to do are what? Like thinking out of the box, looking at a particular problem, looking at patterns, and being able to navigate how, making projections that actually help you, the company, to thrive. So these are some of the things that are really, really important for companies to begin looking at and embracing, and creating a neuro-inclusive workspace that supports the neurodivergent individual.
Absolutely. Mic drops moments already. Thank you so much, Michael and Chelsea. And let me just say, Michael, you have a fan club over in the chat section. People are already sending you kudos and sharing their support with you. All right. Question number 2. What are some common misconceptions about neurodiversity that employers should be aware of? This question is for Courtney and Allie.
Yeah, absolutely. I can kind of kick this one off, Allie, and then I'll pass it over to you. But I think from, we've heard it a couple times already today. We've heard some of those statistics, but one of the biggest misconceptions that we do see from employers is that they don't already have a neurodiverse workforce, and that it is something that they are shifting their focus to begin supporting or begin building this inclusive workspace for new candidates that are coming on board or who are going to be going through the onboarding process, the training process, really trying to dive in and understand accommodations to support these new individuals that are coming to the workplace. And that is 100% great. We want to be making sure that we are supporting those individuals who are new to our organization or new to our neurodiversity hiring program, but we also need to be taking a look internally and tapping into the supports that we can provide those people who are already on our staff, who maybe have been masking or who have not shared their diagnosis previously with an employer for fear of, not being given an accommodation or having it be rejected, or accommodations are just something that is a little bit taboo, has yet to be talked about or discussed. So they're not sure where that conversation may lead. And it's really great to have those accommodations and have this more inclusive process be built for those who are coming into the organization, but also sharing that with the people who are already on staff to say, hey, if there are people internally, sending out a pulse or a check-in, what could we be doing better? Are there things that we could do to make the workplace more friendly and inclusive for those who are already on staff? And I think that kind of goes into a lot of what Allie is working on with the misconceptions around accommodations and around the hiring process. So I'll pass it over to her.
Courtney, you hit the nail on the head with all that. Yeah, I was going to say, the biggest misconception that I see day to day is that everyone who is neurodiverse is aware that they themselves are neurodiverse. Chelsea, you mentioned kind of a late in life diagnosis. Same with myself. And one step further, a lot of those people don't disclose to the organization. I have a social anxiety disorder myself. I'm a recruiter. Like, those things are naturally misaligned, and if I disclosed that, at the top of the interview or at the top of the interview process, there would be definitely fear on my end that there would be repercussions, or I would be initially stigmatized or judged based solely on that information and not on my work productivity. So that's a huge misconception there. You talked about self-ID, Courtney, and I think that's a really important piece of, an inclusive work environment, encouraging people to self-disclose and making sure that it's a safe and supportive environment for them to do so, because it's a very scary thing, and people won't seek accommodations until they feel that it's safe for them to seek those accommodations. Taking that one step further as well, a lot of these accessibility tools that people in a lot of organizations have to request can be used by the entire workforce. If you think of voice to text, or I was actually doing some research earlier, the keyboard itself was originally an accessibility tool for someone who was blind and could not write letters. That's what kind of born the typewriter. So, a misconception is that you need people to ask for these tools. Some of these tools you can make available, and it can help even your neurotypical workforce. I know a lot of people use voice to text now. So those are, I think, the biggest things, aside from the obvious of, if you have X disability, you can't do Y job. I think that's something that needs to be determined on a case-by-case basis, because there are people that have coping mechanisms and have done the work to really get past the stigma of their disability in their work.
I'd like to add on to that too. I think another misconception is that we all need the same things. I'm hearing a lot about accommodations, and we do not all need the same things. We're not all the same. Neurodivergence is a scale for many of us, just like autism is a spectrum. ADHD is a spectrum disorder as well. It's the same within the other components of neurodiverse identities, that we all need different things. And so looking at it as a one-size-fits-all approach to the accommodation process is a huge misconception when it comes to neurodivergence and the various support that we may or may not need in the workplace.
Absolutely, Chelsea. And I think also going off of that, it can be the concept of accommodations for employers who have not broached that topic yet, or who have not really dove into what that means, can be really scary. And a lot of them think that that's going to come with a big price tag as well. And it most of the time does not. It's, things that can be a lot of the times free. So say, there's someone who has challenges with executive functioning, and rather than going into a meeting and firing off meeting notes at them, you send them the meeting notes a day in advance, or even the morning in advance, and say, here's our meeting agenda that we're going to discuss, so that you have an idea of the topics and can prepare any questions. That's going to make things easier for both individuals when they go into the meeting, because the individual is going to feel more prepared, and then the manager is not going to feel like, okay, well, you don't seem prepared, or is not going to be able to have any reasons for why the meeting didn't go in the way that they were wanting to. So that's just one example. Like Chelsea said, accommodations differ for every person. There is no one size fits all, but it has such positive outcomes, and it doesn't always have to cost any money at all.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing that. Let me just say, you all are getting a lot of aha moments in the chat. Someone was aligning with you, Allie, in the sense that they have a job that, based on how you identify, someone might say, what? Like this aligns, you're able to do this. And so so amazing to see how your story is connecting with people already. I saw some others in the chat talking about how they're members of the HR team that they heard saying that their job is to try to figure out whatever they can in order to get accommodations denied. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I hope that the work that we're doing now is going to turn that around. It's gonna help us to be able to recognize what organizations are here and are supportive and want to further this work. And hopefully we'll get to a place where y'all won't need us. we can work ourselves out of a job. I look at those and it's just, wow. Those kinds of complaints, those kinds of comments, it breaks my heart to hear. Going back into the questions. Yes, absolutely. Erica just said, you all give me hope. Wonderful. So question number 3, how can companies ensure their recruitment processes are inclusive of neurodiverse candidates, and what are the implications? We were just talking about how some of these accommodations are free. They're things that can be offered and it's not costing anything. So we're just going right on the line with that. Michael and Allie?
Yes, thank you very much for that question. And it's really, really, really important that we look at how companies are basically recruiting and inviting people to even apply to some of their jobs. The very first thing I would highlight is that it is really, really important how the company writes their job descriptions. Make sure that it's very clear. Make sure that they're using concise language where there are no, the level of ambiguity is reduced, because these are things that would weed out a lot of individuals, because there are certain neurodivergent individuals who, if you are not concise and you make it very lofty, their mind is going to go into all kinds of places and might think they do not qualify for that particular job. But for all you know, they are overqualified for that particular job. So focus on the essential skills and not necessarily all the other things that are not required. Highlight on the company's commitment to actually ensuring that you're creating a neuroinclusive space, or you're creating an inclusive space that caters to people with apparent and non-apparent disabilities. Making sure that the application process is not restrictive, it's very accessible. I've seen certain companies who go even to an extent of not only make it a one size fit all. People are able to even do video applications where it's not just verbal. So these are all things, and these do not really cost you that much, right? Also allowing extra time to complete various kinds of assessments, interview process, making sure that you are asking questions in ways that helps the neurodivergent individual, making them aware that you are able to rephrase questions. You are able to basically clarify, because a lot of times what we do is we've made interview like a got you moment where we are trying to trick people. Sometimes we don't need to trick anyone. We just need to allow them to be themselves and answer questions the way they are supposed to. So these are some of the things that are really, really important. There are a list of other ones, but I would leave it for Ali, who that is her job to basically talk about some of those things.
Awesome. Thanks, Michael. Yes, and you touched on so much of what I had written down a little bit earlier. I think the first thing to start off with is why we want our hiring processes to be inclusive, which y'all ran through a little bit earlier, but people with disabilities are actually one of the highest retention populations that you can hire. So in terms of, a business case, a return on investment, the retention rates there are quite high, quite significant compared to neurotypical populations. Diversity of thought, which was touched on a lot earlier, huge pro for any business. You want to have people that have different perspectives. But also, I think a big one is that Gen Z, the future of employment, identifies as more neurodiverse than any generation before them. We can get into the reasons why on that later, but we need to make sure that our workforce is set up for the future of employment. Otherwise, I think companies are really going to find themselves in hot water in 10, 15 years when they're really at that middle senior management level and needing support that's not already in place. On that support, I think before you even talk about reaching out, really encouraging hiring people with disabilities or neurodiversities, you need to make sure that your company can support those people, because bringing them in is one thing, but if you can't support them throughout their employment, then they're not going to be retained. And that number, if you're doing it for a numbers purpose, which shouldn't be, but if you're doing it for a numbers, if you're looking at those numbers, it's always going to be up and down. So retention and being able to support those employees is a key piece. And so I think that involves training your hiring managers, training, everyone in your organization, but specifically, those people that are people leaders, the people that are doing the interview processes, the recruiters that are bringing these people into the organization. Every step of those people need to be able to support a neurodiverse candidate. So that's something that we're working on right now. I'm currently putting together a training on how neurodiverse people might interview differently. Eye contact is a big thing, and whether or not those neurodiversity quirks, I guess if you want to call them that, whether those things really impact their ability to do the job on the day-to-day. You think of eye contact. Okay, if you're a sales executive, maybe that's important. If you're an accounting manager, is that important to doing your job? Being like, you can still build relationships without eye contact. All those other key pieces of the role can still be done. Another big, easy adjustment to make in terms of an interview process, providing questions at the top of the interview. I know even for neurotypical people, sometimes being given a 3-sentence question, trying to answer that question can be really challenging, trying to remember the first part, the second part, the third part. But especially for people with hearing loss, people with auditory processing disorders, and auditory processing disorders are a symptom of many different neurodiversities. So having those questions at the top of the interview, whether you send them in the Teams chat or you slide a piece of paper over if it's an in-person interview. You touched on kind of offering the video for the application, especially in those early rounds of interviews, offering in-person or video. Different people are comfortable with different options, as well as providing easy avenues for interviewees to request accommodations. I know a lot of organizations, they ask for you to disclose if you have a disability in your initial application. A, we all know that probably a lot of people are saying no, and the answer is yes. But B, most times, I learned this in the past year, the recruiters can't see that because it's part of EEO. So they are not supposed to see that because it can cause discrimination. So your recruiter usually doesn't know going in that you have a disability, so they're not going to know to ask if you need any accommodations. So providing interviewees the easily accessible option to request accommodations, yes, and fostering that safe environment from the recruiter and the hiring manager for them to request those.
One
Awesome.
other thing too I would add is that also a lot of times when uh, an employer feels like they need a headcount or they need to hire someone into a role, a lot of times when they are writing the job description, they have a persona in mind. A lot of times these personas are individuals without a disability. So a lot of the processes that are laid out are ones that are not neuroinclusive. So right from the get-go, once you make that decision that you are going to basically hire into a role, one of the things that I encourage a lot of companies, and these are things that are not really costly, to make sure that they are neuro-inclusive, making sure that the processes that are going to be supporting this role are one that, regardless of whether you have a disability or not, you'll still be able to thrive in that role. In my work as a vocational therapist, I work with a lot of individuals who have been placed in roles that are not a good fit, right? And a lot of times what we notice is that it is not that they are not able to get to the finish line or they are not able to produce. It is just that they are struggling to use the laid out processes that have been created to support that role. So being proactive and making sure that some of these job roles that are being created, you have in mind that it's not only going to be a job for a neurotypical individual or an individual without a disability, but one that would basically be able to be done by basically everyone.
And
Absolutely.
I
Oh,
would
go
even
ahead.
go even earlier than that too, and go into the sourcing phase. Previous recruiter life as well. um, Going even as early as sourcing, if some companies are still doing their own sourcing. I know a lot of companies have opted into AI for that at this point, but there are still a lot of companies that are investing in third-party staffing companies to do that because they still want the human element as a part of their hiring capabilities. When we're looking at resumes and we're looking through them, we need to be very clear on what the top 3 job requirements are, not the personality, not the soft skills. What are the top 3 hard skill requirements for that job? And when we're sourcing those resumes, we need to be looking at every single resume for those and not reviewing for necessarily misspellings in a resume, because why? You can fix that. That's something called coaching. You can coach your candidate on that. If they meet the skills of the job, hey, so-and-so, I noticed some job spellings here, or I noticed some misalignment with some of the things you said. Can we get these touched up on your resume before we give them to the manager, right? Like, those are things that are part of our responsibilities when we're in those types of staffing roles to help with. Additionally to that, moving into the interview phase, and Michael, you kind of touched on this as well. When you're interviewing and you're thinking about a personality type, check yourself, because we want to make sure that we're sticking to the competencies of the job and the skills required to do the job. When we're talking about getting rid of ambiguous wording from job descriptions, it's like great communicator. What does that mean, right? Communication is a style and everybody does it differently. And in the neurodivergent community, we definitely have different ways of communicating. And again, we're not a monolith. So it's all different for us based on the areas of where we are within our own identities, our own lived experiences, and the way we just communicate in general. So that communication style of what you might have of a great communicator can actually lead into a similarity bias. It can actually be something that can limit your best actual potential employee from getting a job because they don't meet your expectation of that personality type. And then lastly, I just wanted to add into the onboarding process, when you're onboarding, to make accommodations easier, to make that more accessible, add a question, simple question, into your onboarding process. Is there anything you need to do your job effectively? That's it. That's all you have to ask. It opens the door to your employee. Even if they say no, they can always come back later. Hey, I've been in the role now for a week and a half, and as I'm starting to get used to the job and I'm starting to understand my team, I do think that there is something I might need to help me do my job more effectively. Can we talk about that again, right? You opened the door in their onboarding process. that's going to tell them that, one, you mean it as an employer, and two, your company also means it. So those are good signals to a new hire.
And I'd love to add one more thing, because you brought up something, Chelsea, that I really resonated with when you're talking about, you know, the process, and there are going to be individuals who get eliminated because they don't meet specific requirements that an employer might have, and trying to get rid of a lot of that verbiage. And that's something that we look at when we're making the job description, because a lot of the time job descriptions are just used and used again and used again, and it may be that job description was for someone in the role 5 years ago, and those aren't reflective of the actual current tasks that this individual will be doing. So making sure that that's very clear, and the idea of having those preferred versus necessary. Let's just have the necessary, and we can discuss, you know, potentially preferred ones. Do you have these different skill sets? Because those are a bonus. Because a lot of the times individuals that I'll be speaking with will say, well, I didn't meet 100% of the requirements that they were asking for, so I just counted myself out immediately, even though they have all of the actual skills and background and education that the company is looking for, but maybe they didn't have that preferred skill, and they said, I wasn't 100% meeting this, so I didn't apply. And it's a job that they would excel at it and would have been a great candidate for. So also including, if there is a preference to have those preferred, including a statement that we encourage all individuals to apply for this position, even if they don't meet 100% of the preferred criteria. Something like that to clarify that an individual doesn't have to have every single, you know, perfect thing that they want them to have. That's something that they could learn once they're on the job.
And this applies as well. Great examples, Courtney. This applies as well for your internal postings. This isn't just your external posting. You know, we're all talking about, even for those promotional opportunity positions, you have somebody in a role right now, there's an open opportunity in the job or in their team, maybe later. These same guidelines and best practices that we're sharing apply for those too, because oftentimes, excuse me, I don't want to overgeneralize. It happens that people will also lose out on opportunities internally because they don't meet those ambiguous, preferred, but not required job descriptions of a promotional opportunity, and then they don't advance. But you have people on your team that can qualify for those jobs, and they might want it. And you can even do more coaching as a leader to get them to be able to meet those required opportunities for the role or the required skills for that job as well. So I know we're going into more here, and there's other questions to get to. I feel like this is a good one for us to just keep digging in on.
I love this so much. Like, y'all are doing my job for me. Let me just go on ahead and retire now. There's so much good meat that you all are giving us. So question number 4, what importance does leadership have in fostering a neurodiversity friendly workplace, and how can they ensure they best support neurodiverse employees in their teams? This question is for Chelsea and Courtney.
Courtney, do you want to, I just spoke. I'm happy to share it with you first.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I do see this as kind of a two-parter question. So I'll answer the first part of this regarding leadership and fostering neuroinclusivity. To kind of summarize it. So first, for me, this really comes with my personal leadership philosophy to be able to also answer this and how I approach coaching, my leadership coaching. It's really based in servant and transformational leadership principles. And I feel like that's really summed up in a quote that I love by Simon Sinek from a 2014 TED Talk. He said, "Leadership is a choice. It is not a rank." Some people in organizations are termed leaders because that is their rank within the organization. They have authority within the organization, but leadership is not innate to them. It is not a natural action for them. So it is vitally important that they lean into and take on the responsibility and choose the leadership role that is a part of their rank and their authority, because people in an organization look to them regardless. So that is the weight that they carry. And when leaders lead by example, people follow because they know that it's not just empty words. They know that there's meaning and backing behind it. It's the most simple leadership principle there is: lead by example. But when we're leading by example, it really matters that we're leading and developing teams with psychological safety. And the reason why I bring this in is because psychological safety is about creating an environment where team members feel safe to speak up without fear of judgment or negative consequences. And accommodations and asking for help has come up a lot. You have to have psychological safety in your teams for people to ask for that additional help. Statistics show that 65% of neurodivergent employees do not disclose because they're scared of being stereotyped. They're scared of being overlooked for those promotional opportunities, because if they say I am this, well, then somebody might think, oh, well, then they can't take on this leadership position, or they can't be promoted to that, right? Because they have a stereotype in their head. So they choose not to disclose. And then you end up missing out again on top talent, because additionally, 51% of neurodivergent people in the workplace today, in your workforce today, your companies are already thinking about or already have left your company because they don't feel and they're lacking the support that they need in the workplace. So that is a big statistic of people, again, and we've already laid out the why, right? Like, neurodivergence brings innovation. It brings the creativity. It keeps your company company competitive in the market, and in a market where you can't fall behind. This isn't the era of technology for companies to be left behind. So that psychological safety is important for people in the disability and in the neurodivergent community and in other communities to say, hey, I need help. Hey, I do need this to be more effective in my job, and to also get that support. It's also very critical that they're getting that support from leadership too, that it's not just an empty request.
I love that, Chelsea. Psychological safety is so key. Absolutely. Courtney, you were going to speak up?
Yes, it is hard to follow that when it comes to talking about the, importance that employers play on supporting their neurodiverse staff. But I also think it is important to mention when it comes to training and educating neurotypical individuals in the workplace about about how to provide that sense of psychological safety, how to present and provide this empathetic and welcoming and understanding environment. And that is totally a top-down approach, because with that sense of authority and being in that role where they get to make these decisions, is this going to be an all-staff training? Is this going to be a presentation that everyone sees, not just managers, not just people in HR? Are we going to have these events where everyone is learning? And is it just a one-time thing, or are we continuing that education and continuing these practices? So we're not just saying, we did it, we had that one training. We are going through a continuous learning process. Our managers are having monthly trainings, or we're touching base about this and seeing the evolution that has come. So they are the ones that can also instill this in the organization. And like I said, it's going to then be something that they give to the people that come in under them, that they train them on. And it's just going to become, hopefully, the norm of the organization.
Absolutely.
If I can
Absolutely.
add on as well,
Allie?
I think just simply also supporting those voices from within your organization, whether you have a disability ERG, a neurodiverse ERG, or you have people from the DE&I team, or whoever that might be in your organization that is advocating or disclosing publicly, really lifting those voices up, and kind of demonstrating to the rest of your organization, kind of like what Chelsea was saying, the psychological safety, demonstrating that there is safety there. When people speak up, it encourages other people to speak up, and leadership, especially very senior leadership, has the ability to really amplify that across the organization.
Absolutely. Michael, were you going to share? It looked like you had something.
No, yeah, I was basically going to also touch on the fact that it's really, really important that a lot of people, regardless of where they are in the organization, gets the opportunity to basically talk about what they've noticed, what they've come into, because a lot of times we only approach neurodiversity from the perspective of, oh, that person can't do this, that person can't do that. Because a lot of times for the neurodivergent individuals themselves, we've created an environment where a lot of them are subconsciously focused on all the things they cannot do as opposed to their superpowers. So sometimes creating a space where that neurodivergent individuals also knows that they belong here is really important by celebrating some of the things that they do well, some of the things that they are good at, right? So making them feel like they belong is really, really important too. So it's not just about, oh, what is it that they are not doing, or how do we just create the space for them? Sometimes also letting them know they are really good at something, because the more they know they are good at something, they focus a lot of energy in improving and doing more of that, where the company actually succeeds. So these are some of the little things that I really think is really important as well.
What a
Absolutely,
great point,
Chelsea.
Michael. Yeah, what a great point, Michael. You know, we've talked a lot about the support that neurodivergent folks might need, but why aren't we also talking about their strengths and the aptitude that they bring, right? And so the elevation of that also plays into psychological safety as well. When you're, as a leader, when you are taking a step back to promote the behavior, to promote the wins of your people and the strengths that they're bringing to your team, that brings affirmation, that word of affirmation. If people followed love languages, words of affirmation is a big deal, right? Like that actually helps to motivate people and it helps to keep good behavior going. So that's a really great example, Michael.
Absolutely. And Chelsea, I was going to make that connection. I felt like he was speaking to that psychological safety 100%. Y'all, we have one more question, or one pre-selected question for the panel. This has been amazing. Question number 5, final question for you and Michael, Chelsea. How are we redefining our internal systems and structures to be more neuro-inclusive?
So I would group this into various clusters and we'll talk a little bit about them. So I'll pass it on to Chelsea. The very first one is the work environment. It's really important. And these things I'm going to talk about are not really expensive. Like a lot of the big companies, the Fortune 500 and so on, may be able to provide this, but also a small mid-sized company is also able to. So workplace environment, for instance, creating a sensory friendly spaces. And this could be just a quiet space, right? Quiet space with lighting that are not really disturbing, flexible workstations, having sit-stand desk. These are things that not only neurodivergent individuals will benefit from, any other person would benefit from. Like Ali was talking about, creating a space that has a lot of curb cuts, right? Curb cuts are basically things that were designed for like people with disability, that now everybody benefits from it. Clear signage, making sure that signage in the offices are very clear languages. Flexible work schedule, and we should go into the mind space of it's not a one size fits all for everyone, because neurodivergent individuals go across as a spectrum. There are some that would benefit from office. There are some that would benefit from a hybrid. There are some that would benefit from complete remote work stations. So working with that individual to know what best helps them. And also when we talk about providing some of these things, we are not saying you should reduce the expectation of the role or you should eliminate job functions. That's not what we are talking about. We are talking about the fact that you are able to provide these things and make sure that everybody is meeting the same expectation as set for everyone. Removing barriers or making sure that an environment is neuro inclusive does not really impact the productivity standard or the expectation of the role. So I don't want employers to think that these things we are talking about are going to reduce the productivity of the role. Communication practices is another one. Making sure that you have multiple avenues or multiple approaches, formats that you communicate. Don't only send out like written, or don't only do it verbal. Make sure that you're tailoring it to people who learn differently, right? Because it's really important to understand that if you communicate based on the way someone learns, they grasp it quicker and they are able to actually innovate on that information, as opposed to providing it in a way that they do not grasp it easily. Then now they experience challenges. Clear communication, structured meetings where you have things structured, or even making sure that recaps are sent out after every meeting, right? So having various transcription tools in the meetings that helps. These are all things that are really, really helpful. I would also talk a little bit about performance management. A lot of times, performance management is a big thing that impact a lot of neurodivergent individuals. I'll tell you, the statistics is, I'll tell you that it is more than half, like neurodivergent individuals are at a higher rate of being put on a performance management than any other person. That is part of the reason why you find a lot of neurodivergent individuals jumping from job to job to job, because a lot of times they are being hit with performance management, not because they are not able to do the work. A lot of times is because the processes that have been laid out are not one that are neuroinclusive. So what do you expect? You are evaluating them based on neurotypical processes. They are not going to meet your expectation. So beginning to change those processes to make them neuro-inclusive is going to be key. Also learning and development, making sure that learning and development, things that you are putting out are accessible to everyone. Making sure that, and these are some of the things Ali also highlighted, that a lot of times people feel like, oh, someone needs to request a formal accommodation for certain things to be available. I will tell you that creating a neuro-inclusive or an inclusive workspace means that you are going to, let's say, it's standard that you would have a text-to-speech function on every work device that you give out. Certain kinds of tools like pro writing aid, Got It. All these are tools that help like people with dyslexia being able to change the backgrounds of the interface to dark mode, bright mode, whatever. You have those things available. Various assistive technologies that are not really costly. You could have them on the computer ahead of time, so people do not need to basically disclose they have a disability to get them. Team dynamics. These are things that Chelsea and Ali talked about, making sure that people are provided training to understand what neurodiversity is and how to support or create a neuro-inclusive workspace. Leadership culture. These are all things. I would leave some for Chelsea to basically jump on. So Chelsea, over to you.
Michael, so great. You just really like encapsulated almost just pretty much everything really right there. That was so great. I would say, you know, if I'm to hop in from the leadership standpoint, it really does come down to that intentional leadership and really starting to get really granular with your people. What might feel like it takes time in fast-paced environments, especially when teams might be running low, maybe everybody's kind of stretched, kind of thin, taking that intentional time will have bigger payoffs later. Have you ever heard the saying, work smarter, not harder? I feel like intentional leadership is working smarter, not harder. When you take the time for consistent one-on-ones with your people whenever possible, when you use those opportunities to really get to know your people and find out how they're actually functioning in their working environment, if they do need things to be more effective, how they're communicating or how they're working together with their teams, how to leverage their strengths better, how to empower their strengths better. That's when you're really going to have a really highly productive team. And then, you know, you're going to also have a team that's going to be loyal. They're going to be with you for a long time. So And then intentional leadership, I don't think that's a key. I haven't seen that as a key term anywhere, you know, that servant leadership, transformational leadership, that mentality, that mindset of leadership is really going to get you what you need out of all of your people, which is the concept of neurodiversity, right? It's the concept of all of our minds working together inclusively, neuroinclusivity.
Y'all, this has been so incredibly amazing. We got so many wonderful questions in the chat, and I'm looking at the time and we're at 1:55. Y'all, okay, so let me do this. There was one that really resonated with me, and I'm not going to even read the entire thing. I'm just going to read the portion that I feel you all could speak to. The question is, I'd love to hear from those who are nonverbal or have been in environments where there are nonverbal individuals in the workplace. What suggestions, if any, does anyone have regarding this? The person has a child that is nonverbal and is kind of prepping themselves on how to support their child through that process. And so I don't know if anyone on the panel personally has an experience with this, but I wanted to highlight this because we have such a vast amount of individuals that are on this call that may have had some experience with this. And so with that being said, please respond to this question either in the chat, or if we have anyone on the panel that has any experience with this, we'd love to hear from you.
So this is a question that I would have a lot of questions before answering, because like we always say, when we talk about neurodivergent conditions, we are not looking at like a one size fit all. A lot of times where I cringe when I hear people say, oh, I'm an expert of X, Y, or Z, and they would give general. So it is not one that I could say, but there are some best practices that I would be able to go over. For instance, if this individual is nonverbal but communicates through other means, making sure that we are training everyone that they're going to interact with how this individual communicates. So they are proactive, they know, and they look out for such communications. Be it they send you an email, be it they have to prompt you by sign or whatever it is, making sure that these things are communicated very well to that in the people that they work with. So providing training, sensitive training to support that individual. The other thing too that I would want to highlight is that when we talk about disability, one of the things that we want to emphasize on is the fact that a lot of people have made the word disability a very negative thing. It's not. Every one of us throughout our lives are going to be disabled, whether you like it or not, because we are human beings. So learning to treat or create the space for people with disability to exist and thrive and do well. When you do that, you are not doing anybody any extra work, service, or any extra thing. You are basically helping yourself, because one day when you become disabled, people would have that empathy to create that space for you as well, right? So these are some of the things that are really, really important for us to basically highlight. And for your kid, this is also a good time to begin helping them to begin honing in on whatever communication style that they use and beginning to train the people around them, so they are able to be self-sufficient and begin to also interact and teach other people themselves, so that they are able to advocate for themselves and not just needing only you or other people advocating for them as well. So these are going to be some of the things that I would highlight.
Y'all, this has been so incredible. I cannot believe that just those few questions have taken us all the way to this point. I think we need a full week. We need a week, a work camp, boot camp, whatever it is, to be able to dive into all of the different facets and dimensions of this particular topic. Y'all have been absolutely incredible. I want to give a small little pause of apology to our audience, because we have gotten so invested in the questions and the responses and everything. We have not gotten the opportunity to be able to answer all of the questions. I want to do this. I want to, if this is okay with the panel, we would love to connect with you. Please connect with the panelists on LinkedIn. They are incredible resources. They are connected with organizations that have incredible resources. And so if by chance we weren't able to get to your question, please know we are here to support in any way that we can. Again, thank you so much, everyone, for sharing your experiences, your perspectives, and knowledge with us as members of the community, as well as representatives from your organizations. We hope that you learned something. I know that I did. Please check out our events page on careercircle.com/events to register for upcoming webinars we have in store. We'll be sending you an email with today's recording, resources discussed, as well as upcoming event information. So be on the lookout. Thank you again for coming. Please feel free to connect with us. Thank you so much again to our wonderful panelists. You all are getting a virtual applause from me. Thank you all so much. Until next time, have a wonderful rest of your day, everyone. Bye-bye.